does progressive Christianity mean? It's a good question. The word progressive itself can be difficult. It can mean different things to different people. It probably means different things to all of you. And it can be a source of dissension sometimes. I'm part of the group that organises these PC forums, presentations, and this is something that our task group has often wrestled with, the word progressive, asking ourselves, do we change our name perhaps to avoid being characterised as holier than thou? The late John Fitzner, who was part of PCNet, way back 15 years ago in November of 2011, had this to say about what progressive meant to him. And I have to admit that reading it again, I can't really add anything more to it. The word progressive has the word progress in it, which suggests some kind of forward movement. Also in other areas besides religion, progressive tends to be seen as the opposite of conservative, and Christians with a more conservative outlook tend to focus on faithfully preserving traditions of the past, which is their religious heritage. People with a more progressive outlook tend to see the need for tradition to keep evolving in response to the changes in the world. And in a book titled The Dishonest Church by someone called Jack Good, John says he speaks of those who are chaos intolerant, in other words, conservative people who don't like change, and those who are chaos tolerant, in other words, people who welcome change. Progressives, according to John, are chaos tolerant people. They're comfortable with ambiguity, uncertainty, and unanswered questions. Progressives are not literalistic, not strongly doctrinal, interested deeply in issues of social justice and ecology, not seeing Christianity as having absolute truth and being the only religion, inclusive of all people, irrespective of their faith or lack of faith, their religion, race, gender, sexual orientation. So tonight we have two people, Marion Millen and Michael Dowling, who are two people who fit that progressive definition nicely as far as John Fitzner is concerned. Two people, we might say, who are chaos tolerant. Marion grew up in a village and town on the edge of Dartmoor in Devon, so she's a POM like me, and attended the local Methodist chapel there. Before gaining a Bachelor of Science degree honours in geography and geology, then married and migrated with her husband here to Australia, to Perth in Western Australia in the early 70s. And she claims to have had three careers. The first as the mother of two wonderful sons, and I would say that that's a career as well. I've got three children. The second as a teacher of English to adult migrants and refugees, and that for 2 decades. And the third career came with a call to ministry within the Uniting Church in Australia. She studied for a Bachelor of Divinity and was ordained in 1998. And she's been a prison chaplain since, in Perth's women's prison, a minister to the Wembley Downs Uniting Church congregation, and she's served as Associate General Pastoral with the Western Australian Synod, so she's had experience with all levels of the Uniting Church. She retired early to what she calls walk the Alzheimer's journey with her husband, and since his death she's moved to Adelaide to be close to family and currently worships with the Seaford Uniting Church congregation. A quote from Marion. Someone remarked recently how our older generation had been through one of the greatest changes ever in human existence. I can look back and see how my own spiritual journey has progressed within it, now being on what I call the left wing branch of the vine. But it's also left me wondering how and in what form Christianity will continue into the future. Not just progressive Christianity, but Christianity itself. So would you please welcome Marion Miller. Our second speaker tonight is Michael Dowling. Michael's life has been heavily shaped by three intertwining elements. There's three again. The scientific understanding of the world, his Christian faith, and the human experience of life. He was raised in the Roman Catholic Church, and he observed his Irish parents as being a model of willingness to question traditional authority, something not typically encouraged within the Catholic faith. By his early 20s, traditional Christianity had become for him so meaningless that he walked away from the church, becoming a fully fledged outsider, a couldn't care less agnostic for some 14 years. In his professional life, after completing a BSc honours degree in chemistry, Michael worked for 5 years as an analytic chemist before moving into the field of scientific instruments for 20 years, providing technical sales and support for complex scientific instrumentation. In 1993, Michael's trajectory as a faith outsider altered radically during a personal development workshop due to a profound experiential realisation of connectedness to his deeper self, to other people, and to the ultimate reality that we call God. This led to 15 years of questioning, exploring various belief systems, which culminated in a decision in 2008 to begin a Bachelor of Ministry, starting a pathway to ordination in the Uniting Church in Australia. And this also included, critically, a reimagining for him of the Christian faith that he had earlier rejected. After graduation and ordination, Michael worked for 6 years as an aged care chaplain. He ceased employment to care for his chronically ill wife in the last year of her life, and after this, he took up a 5-year placement as a minister of the Uniting Church congregation. He's retired. He's a former minister of the Uniting Church. He's married now and he lives in Adelaide. An avid and lifelong learner, he maintains an enduring fascination with the interface between science, faith, and lived experience. A quote from Michael: "On my very non-linear journey into ministry, I discovered within myself a passion to make sense of this life that we live. I developed an almost insatiable curiosity about the intersection between our lived human experience, the workings of the natural world, of which we humans form an integral part, and the ever-changing scientific understanding of the same, and our understanding of and faith in the God who loves us." Michael describes himself as a former Uniting Church minister, a lapsed chemist, and a lapsed Catholic. Please welcome Michael Dowling. Each of our speakers will now have 10 minutes to present to you their understanding of what progressive Christianity means. Not just in the wider sense, but in a very personal sense. They'll each have 10 minutes, and then the three of us will be in conversation for a short while, and then there will be an opportunity for you to join in with any questions that you might have. Questions that might include a bit of an understanding of where you come in the spectrum of progressiveness, but we don't want your life history. So please keep it short. And you need to know now that if you want to ask a question, we ask you to come out here to the microphone, because if you ask from where you're sitting, the good folks that I have failed miserably to greet until now, welcome people watching online. The good folks watching online will, with the live stream, will not be able to see you and not be able to hear you very well. So I'm saying to you, be brave. Come out the front and ask your question. Don't just sit there and think, no, I can't. So Marion, would you like to tell us what makes you a progressive Christian?
I was just going to ask if you could hear me. Okay. I will keep going. And I'm seeing nodding heads. Great. Thank you for that introduction. To be honest with you, I'm only just hanging in with that term Christianity because it carries so much abhorrent and harmful baggage, including being used as a weapon of power and abuse, even this week. My preferred term is follower of the Jesus way, which of course is what early disciples labeled themselves, echoing that quote, I am the way, the truth, and the light, with I am playing on that term Yahweh, the unspoken name of God in Jewish traditions, which means I am who I am, I will be who I will be, a sense of ultimate consciousness. So for me, progressive Christianity is about intentionally peeling back the layers of what I see as abusive theology, literalisms, power control, to enable an opening up to that consciousness. And I apologize that the following is a bit self-focused to illustrate what I mean, and it's also a tad longer than 10 minutes. Apologies for that. But I don't have any overheads. Anyway, our older generation had been through one of the greatest changes ever in human existence. And when I was born, just after the war, in a village on the western edge of Dartmoor, most of the world's population still lived in rural village or town settings with their associated communities. But as of 2008, more than half the human race now lives in cities, with access to nature and finding a sense of community becoming difficult, especially with a busy work and commuting schedule. In my first decade, we didn't have a phone or a TV in the house, and I can remember the milk being delivered in churns on a horse and cart. Then came the joy in my second decade of our family moving into a small town, and a phone and a TV set arriving thanks to a gift from my grandmother. But more importantly, being able to visit the library card with 4 precious library cards in hand. And so my own consciousness of the world started opening up. Now, of course, we have computers and electronic devices for immediate access to knowledge and information. And the world has instant communication on tap. And goodness knows where this AI will lead us. But I wonder what all that is doing for our anxiety levels and our ability to pause and reflect and just be. In my early teenage years, thanks to a caring chapel community, my own spiritual consciousness also expanded from being me-centered to other-focused. I remember a soloist singing in our church, "If I can help somebody as I pass along," remember that? "Then my living will not be in vain." And thinking, well, that makes sense. Still does now. But lots of preaching stuff I was hearing didn't make sense. And the Sunday school teachers couldn't seem to cope with my questioning when they were trying to shape me to become a member of the Methodist Church. And then one Sunday I heard actor David Kossoff, who actually had a quarter of an hour on TV reading Bible stories for children, sing a song. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. Excuse, I haven't got the music right. And I took this as permission to keep on questioning, and have been doing so ever since. Never underestimate the power of music, hymns, and songs. Oh, and the written word, of course. The arrival of the New English translation of the New Testament at that time made a big difference to my understanding after struggling with the King James Version. And then 2 days later, I'm with a group of who has a Jewish lady in there, when she asks, why do you Christians take the scriptures so literally true when so much was written as metaphor and theological reflection to make meaning of life? Ah, indeed. This was something which I was to explore later when doing my BD studies, including learning Hebrew and discovering quite warped translations into English versions of the Bible. But my greatest challenge came at the age of 17, when my father died suddenly of a heart attack just a week before Christmas. Time stood still, leaving me numb whilst trying to support my mother and my younger brother. Faith shattered. There was little or no pastoral care in those days. But I shall never forget a young woman in our congregation catching up with me coming out of church one Sunday after Christmas and saying, I lost my father at your age too. I know what it's like. And she then thrust a £5 note into my hand, which was a lot of money in those days, saying, go buy yourself something nice. Well, I actually stayed on an extra year at school to be with my mum and earned some money and spent time reading, including about what motivated the Wesley brothers and the Methodist tradition, and books like Leslie Weatherhead's The Will of God, and poetry from the likes of Waldo Emerson and John Keats. And 'twas this reading and the young woman's act of loving kindness that opened the door to what I now call a sense of the God potential within, which didn't exactly line up with the traditional shame and fear-based and judgmental preaching that I was hearing from the pulpit. So perhaps little wonder that I drifted away from the church scene when I went off to university on the other side of the country. And then big upheavals in the 70s and 80s for me saw me getting married, migrating to Perth with my husband, rearing 2 sons, while doing part-time teaching of English to migrants and refugees, and hearing some horrendous stories of man's inhumanity to man. My own spiritual explorations over those 2 decades took me down the track of finding out about other religious traditions, including Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, before resuming my Christian journey gradually, thanks to liberation theologians upholding social justice dynamics, and feminist theologians emphasizing the need for inclusivity and a reclaiming of the feminine face of God. Oh, and I also dived into Jungian perspectives, including the importance of reclaiming rather than condemning our shadow side. However, I've jumped a bit because the greatest change in our entire human perception actually occurred on Christmas Eve, 1968. You'll remember it when I say to you, that was the day the Apollo 8 mission captured and sent back that image of Earth from space. That photo, together with the moon landing 6 months later, shifted human consciousness on this planet forever. And since then, of course, amazing discoveries about our universe from telescopes parked out in space has jolted understandings even further. Our sun is an insignificant star. Our Earth is but a grain of dust within it. And I can still remember being gobsmacked to hear Carl Sagan in his amazing 1980s TV series, The Cosmos is Within Us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. Or as Professor Brian Cox on a recent TV program playfully pointed out, a collection of atoms have come together that can now do astronomy. And all this, ironically, when fewer and fewer of the world's population can actually see any stars in the night sky because of light pollution. So the crucial question then arises, is consciousness separate from or an integral part of the universe? Well, for me, it's led to the realization of something that deep down I have always felt, namely that there is a divine energy permeating within and through and beyond the universe. Call what you will, God, Holy One, the great I am, and that I can open myself to that dynamic when I take time to be still. Use the word meditate, use the word prayer. I can tap into it when I'm walking by the sea, in the garden, sharing in a caring community, in creative words, in song. And I also see this God seed potential within each baby born. How it will unfold is another story, which is where the need for a framework for our human living becomes important, as the prophet Micah realized so long ago when he wrote, "What does Yahweh require of you but to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God?" Or as Professor Sir Lloyd Gearing at the last Common Dreams conference put it, God is the process of creativity itself. God is not the name of a supernatural being, but rather it's a symbolic term which gathers us all up in the supreme values that I feel bound to respond to: honesty, justice, compassion, love, fair play. That's his quote. So wherein lies Christianity for our coming age? Will it still hold any validity? There are parts of Christianity that have bunkered down defensively into literalist strongholds or aggressively into nationalistic eschatology. All the more reason for upholding a progressive space. But I have great concern about us losing touch with just how radical Jesus was in upturning abusive thinking. Jesus actually upheld a sense of shalom, a peace that involved the harmony and well-being of all in society. And he envisaged God's domain not as separate from, but as present in the world. And he encourages followers to challenge unjust powers that create poverty and exclusion, and to live intentionally in caring relationship with each other, sharing resources. This is what it meant to be fully human. So little wonder Jesus called himself Son of Man. It's not a theological flex. It's a declaration of solidarity with the human condition. Now, that resonates with me far more than any creed. I'm afraid I don't say too much of the creeds anymore. Last month, here at AFL, when we were listening to those two young people speak, I was aware that both were talking about the importance of being able to share their sense of spirituality in a community of acceptance. I'm not sure where the word progressive lies going into the future, but I do see a truly inclusive community as essential, and that includes sensitivity to our use of language too. The key questions will still be, how do we followers of the Jesus way enable connection with a sense of spirituality both within and beyond? Joy, wonder. How do we intentionally engage in progressive actions, challenging evil and justice, be present to suffering and tragedy, uphold a sense of hope? And how do we share in this with the next generation? So yes, our age group has been through probably the greatest change in human existence, but I do still see Jesus' philosophy and modeling as providing a valid and valued framework for our human living into the future. Love your neighbour as yourself sums it up. As to the sign that we put outside my old church at Wembley Downs, live life loved. Live life loved. Thank you.
Can't do much better than live life loved. That's beautiful. Thank you, Marion. I've learned already that progressiveness is not cut and dried, but it's a process, a growing into. Let's find out how Michael grew into his progressiveness.
This actually, it is on. Yeah, as I said, what a marvellous introduction to the question tonight. Mine's going to be quite different. It's going to be not really autobiographical. We might get into that in the discussion or might not, but it will be a different take, so hopefully complementing what Marion has shared. I, like Maureen, feel that progressive Christianity is an unusual term. Progressive's a strange word. It's a very positive word. It comes from the root, of course, progress, and who can argue with progress? Only thing is that often words like progress and reform are used by politicians as propaganda terms. They're used by politicians as propaganda terms to justify raping and pillaging the earth. They're used as propaganda terms to justify tilting the levers of government policy and regulations so that more and more wealth flows into the coffers of those already fabulously wealthy. So I'm a little bit suspicious of the word progress. However, what I'd like to begin with is an area of endeavour that is unambiguously full of progress over the course of its activity. And that area is the dominion of science. I'm going to use this as a parallel to Christianity, religion, in terms of its progress during that time. So first of all, science has done spectacularly well when it comes to increasing the progress in its understanding of reality. If we consider back in the 17th century, Isaac Newton, genius, came up with the universal theory of gravitation, an extraordinary intellectual accomplishment which predicted and explained so many facts. Fast forward 250 years and we have the genius of Albert Einstein taking it to another level with his theory of general relativity, a theory so spectacularly successful it has been used to predict phenomena to extraordinary levels of precision. On the atomic scale, we have the genius New Zealand scientist Ernest Rutherford with his early 20th century model of the atom, which progressed over something like 100 years to where we are now in the beginning of the 21st century, to the standard model of particle physics. Again, an extraordinary intellectual achievement capable of predicting results to an unbelievable level of precision. There has been an incredible progress in science during this time, and I want to highlight that this is not science describing what reality is, but it is science creating models of reality, deep intellectual theoretical frameworks to try to model reality. That word model will come in significant. However, the progress of science in terms of its understanding of reality hasn't really been matched by the application. There has been quite a level of ambivalence. If we consider GPS satellites, wonderful achievement, helps us navigate with Google Maps to the event tonight if we haven't come here before. But it's also used to target missiles, to murder thousands of people. Splitting the atom has the extraordinary capability of generating nuclear power or nuclear weapons. It's quite ambivalent. What about over the Christian history of Christianity's understanding of what I would like to call ultimate reality? I use this as a synonym for God. I prefer it. I think ultimate reality is a better term, and we might get into that during our discussion. How well has it gone in increasing its understanding of ultimate reality, not just reality? In the 500 years since the Reformation, I think a very strong case could be made that a very large segment of the Christian community has made no progress at all in understanding ultimate reality. The theology is essentially the same. And I wonder whether the reason for this complete lack of progress in a very large chunk of the Christian community is due to the fact that they did not regard it as a model that they were creating. Not a theory that I could compare my model of ultimate reality with yours and we could discuss it. No, I have the truth, the whole truth, and absolutely nothing but the truth. Absolute certainty of dogma. Why would you try to increase your understanding of ultimate reality if you already knew everything? What about the application of Christian understanding of its understanding of ultimate reality over the centuries? It has been a very ambivalent application of that understanding of ultimate reality. There has been extraordinary Christian love in so many ways and so many shapes and forms that moves me to tears, that has moved many people to tears and inspires their lives still. There has also been Christian viciousness, crusades, inquisition, wars, violence, bigotry into our own day. And if you think all that violence is yesteryear, don't wish too hard for a test of that theory, because we just might get it in the United States if they ever go for a full-blown Christian nationalistic government. Why such ambivalence to Christians' understanding of ultimate reality? We'll come to that in a moment. I think progressive Christianity's particular contribution to our understanding of ultimate reality and its application is in an area that's actually quite negative. And here I'm going to be quite negative, but hopefully in a really positive way. Not via something called the via positiva, but via the via negativa. And what I mean by that is, if we try to improve our understanding of something, try to improve how something works, we can do one of two things. We can either add good stuff to it, or we can take the bad stuff out of it. And I don't actually know that progressive Christianity has been terribly good at adding the good stuff to Christianity, but I think it's very good at taking the bad stuff out via the via negativa. What this is on the part of progressive Christianity is a commitment to rejecting that which is false. And we'll give 3 examples of that. First of all, rejecting the laughable. The Ricky Gervais movie, The Invention of Lying, the plot doesn't really concern us here, but there is an immortal line issued by the Ricky Gervais character. He says at one point, confronted with this huge crowd in front of him, there's a man in the sky who's in control of everything. I would like to assert that to a first approximation, this is the traditional Christian understanding of the God of the Bible. A man in the sky who's in control of everything. And I think one of progressive Christianity's great gifts to the world, great gifts to Christianity, is to actually reject the laughable understandings of God. But so rejecting the laughable as part of the via negativa. But it's not just that understanding of God as a man in the sky in control of everything. It's also a man in the sky who's not just like believing in fairies at the bottom of the garden. It's not inconsequential, because here we're talking about the God of the Bible. And the God of the Bible is most ambivalent, that biblical God. We see a biblical God who is a God of love on one hand, and on the other hand, a God of violence, mass murder, and genocide. And I wonder if you can actually somehow wrap your mind around a God who's both loving and mass murdering and genocidal. If you can whitewash that God, it is small beans indeed to believe that God required the human sacrifice of his only son. It's a very trivial next step. And I wonder, might this ability to whitewash the genocidal, violent God of the Old Testament be an explanation for the viciousness, the mass murder, the bigotry that we've seen over the centuries in the Christian faith? That if mass murder and violence is good for God and God's holy, then we as followers of God, we can do the same, and we can be washed clean too. We are holy and righteous. And so, for me, a key part of progressive Christianity, as part of this via negativa, the rejection, is the rejection of the abhorrent in our scriptures and in our theology. The third one, rejecting that which is blatantly contradicted by the evidence. And here, the first one, creationism versus evolution. I don't need to really dwell too much on that, but there is an awful lot of Christians in our world who cling to the myth of Adam and Eve as if it is literally so, because it's tied in to a theology around something called the fall, necessitating the human sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. It's mighty hard to let go of it and to actually accept the clear evidence that Adam and Eve did not exist, they were a myth, and we have our evolution through some other means. Also, an interventionist God. I really don't know how anyone can believe in an interventionist God after the Holocaust. 6 million Jews praying to God not be killed. However, there are still Christians in our world who accept an interventionist God. Maybe an interventionist God who'll help them get a park if they're running late for the shops. A God who's clearly not too concerned about genocide and Holocaust, but is very, very focused on convenience parking. What about the theology of the cross? I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard, on the cross, Jesus Christ defeated sin and death. This most certainly has to go under the rubric, never let the evidence get in the way of a good story. As we look at our world full of sin and death, a very strong argument could be made that Jesus' death on the cross did nothing whatsoever about sin and death in our world. It is entirely contradicted by the evidence. And so a commitment, the via negativa, to rejecting that which is clearly contradicted by the evidence, I think is a great gift that progressive Christianity can offer. I think one of the things that progressive Christianity does and can do is offer a new meta-narrative. A meta-narrative in place of the old Christian meta-narrative, which has become utterly meaningless. A meta-narrative starting with the Garden of Eden and a world created perfect with no sin, no natural disasters, no death, and the fall, and then Jesus having to come and die on the cross as a sacrifice, and then maybe one day to come again on the clouds of heaven as Jesus the sequel and make it all better. That has lost all meaning. And a new narrative, a new meta-narrative that rejects the laughable, rejects the abhorrent, rejects that which is contradicted by evidence, embraces positively contributing to the world instead, embraces new learning from a diversity of fields, and embraces the person and teaching of Jesus, a model for our living in the world. There are just a few thoughts. I'm sure we'll talk about other things in our discussion. Thank you.
Who is obviously a person who has thought through the connection between our life, between our Christianity and science. Someone of the Baha'i faith once said to me, religion and science are like the two wings of a bird. The bird cannot fly unless it has both. And I guess that takes me to just adding to what Marion and Michael have said, my own interpretation of progressiveness as being encompassing everything and everyone. My history is with working with students of all different nationalities and different religions at Flinders University. And from them I learned a sense of strong sacredness, a sense of the divine in every religion. Perhaps the best example I can give you was one day sitting with a group of students. One young woman was very well advanced in pregnancy, and they wanted to pray for her and to pray for her unborn child. And we sat in a circle, and we were joined by a white thread that was unrolled between us, so that we were all holding on together, forming a unit. And I didn't understand the words of the prayer, but I had a strong sense of the presence of God, whether you call it God or what was your term, Michael?
Ultimate reality.
Ultimate reality. God, ultimate reality, the ground of being, whatever you call it. I find God everywhere. I find God in other people. I find God in other religions. So I guess what I'd like to ask you two, where do you sit? Where do you find God? And you have to just about eat it.
Yeah. Where do I find God? I think I already said that sense of I find God when I'm in a street and I'm not in a good space and someone goes past me and gives a smile and says hello and how are you today?
Yes.
I find God in the beauty or the strength of walking down by the sea and watching the endlessness of the waves rolling in, the sense of my reality within the greater reality. I find God in, as you know, reading is very important to me, the sense that maybe in poetry, it may be in a song, something that moves me, that somebody has said. So it's more a feeling and it's more experience. It's not a person per se for me, and yet there is that loving energy that is there. I hope that covers what you're asking.
Yeah.
I'll answer by way of just sharing what for me has become a capital T truth in my life, and that is the fact that my life is not about me. And when I don't live out of that reality, when I live out of my life is me and I'm focused on me, and my fretting concerns and worries and whatever, I have a diminished and shrunken life. When I forget about myself, when I experience self-forgetfulness, I encounter the real meaning of my life. And that's in the connection that I have with other people, with nature, with that ultimate reality. And so for me, that connection with ultimate reality, I have experienced it in many different contexts. Walking in nature, as Marion has said, I've encountered it in deep personal conversations with other human beings where I've entirely forgotten about myself in that moment, and it's like the two of us are on holy ground together, connected. I've seen it, felt it in the natural world during meditation, but it's almost always when I manage somehow to forget about myself.
I think in the Celtic tradition there are things that are called, or places that are called between times, or the thin times.
In places.
And if we think of our material reality here, and we think of a spiritual time, energy, whatever here, there are times, and sometimes it's when it's tragedy and suffering, where that space opens up and something unheralded comes into that space that gives us the hope to keep moving. And yes, you can feel it as a presence like you did express just now. I certainly experienced this when my husband was going down the Alzheimer's track at his dying time.
Yes.
And those thin times, the Celtic peoples used to associate them with special places in nature. So in some ways, and the Aboriginal peoples here in Australia.
Yes.
So in some ways, we're almost going back into a full circle of understanding that reality that is there for us. Thank you.
Yeah. That strong sense of not being alone, of being upheld, supported, so that even when we are dealing with the things of the via negativa, the things that we want to remove from Christianity that Michael was talking about. We are not alone. We are able to face being difficult people. Our Prime Minister called Grace Tame a difficult person. And I've since read comments from other women who say, yeah, she's a difficult woman. She should wear that with pride. You know, I'm a difficult woman too. Because I am able to stand up and speak for myself, not just in a feminist sense, but also for what I believe, for what I believe as part of my religious faith. And that takes courage. So I guess, Michael, the via negativa takes courage, takes the willingness to look at and treasure what we have from the past. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Don't throw out the Bible, which is a book of beautiful stories with much wisdom in it, as well as violence and genocide. Being able to see your way through balancing things is when things get out of balance, I think, that we go off the rails. Michael, I know you said that your belief concentrates on that negative side, on taking away the things that are not useful anymore. And I have to admit, there are, like Marion, there are creeds that I can't say and beautiful hymns that I can't sing anymore. Yes. Yeah. Michael, can you see some positives that we can contribute to make the word progressive and progressive Christian mean not just someone who stands up and says, that's wrong, let's leave it out, but someone who says, shall we do this?
Got a few things I can share, thoughts that have occurred to me, but I think the far and away the most powerful thing I can say is looking at the life of Jesus, looking at how he lived, looking at what he taught. And if there isn't enough inspiration in his life, in his message, in his teaching, I don't know why there isn't enough in that, because he was such an extraordinary exemplar of what it means to be human, of living with courage, of calling out injustice, of speaking truth to power, of engaging compassionately, and in his age, engaging compassionately in a way that went beyond boundaries of ethnicity and gender. He was open to being corrected by the Syrophoenician woman, who, you know, he referred to as a dog. He was an extraordinary person, and I would say there is an enormous amount of positivity in that. On other areas, I guess for me, coming back to that self-forgetful aspect of my life not being about me, but my life is about connection. When I, to the extent that I can forget about myself and connect with others and connect with nature and life and that ultimate reality, I'm connecting to something real, something absolutely tangible. It's not subjective, that we are connected on so many levels. It is staggering, connected at the level of the biosphere to every living thing on the face of this earth. We are dependent upon them. We're connected at a subatomic level. There are invisible quantum fields permeating this room, permeating the entire universe, out of which emerge the particles that make us up. We are unbelievably connected. Science has been very successful at getting to the current point of understanding, but to say it knows everything is just a ridiculous overstatement. The wonder, the absolute glory of it, still to be revealed, I think, is incredibly positive. And to say that there's this distinction between the natural and the supernatural. I think truly if we had our eyes opened to the totality of ultimate reality at every level, not just the Big Bang, but why the Big Bang? Why were the fundamental constants of the universe just so, without which the universe could never have arisen? Why, how did life emerge from non-life in the early universe? So many questions. Is there a direction in mind for the evolution not just of species on Earth, but the evolution of the whole universe? Is there some teleological goal? The totality of ultimate reality. I mean, the extraordinary positivity that is there to be learned from progressive gaining of understanding, I think is incredibly positive. But at this stage, there's a whole lot of speculation about, well, apart from waving your hands, what is it? Short answer is, I don't know, but it's pretty exciting.
But isn't that just where we're coming to? The fact that it is important to be able to say, I don't know. I don't have all the answers.
There is another dimension here, which is the real negative side and the downside, the sense of, we talked about our humanity and how we're being human. Well, how do we be when we encounter inhumanity? That's the crucial stuff, because when I went down the track, if I may use the example, 2.5 decades ago, of prison reform, the prisons in WA were in a shocking state. And on one's own, one cannot challenge such inhumanity. But when one is in a community of people who've got similarly minded values, then there is a chance of changing things and moving forward. So that's that sense for me that progressive Christianity, for me, has a strong social justice side, which is Jesus' modelling. So that sense of humanity and challenging that, yeah, we got the churches together, we've got a group of women together, men together, and we made a huge progress through things. The one thing, the negative stuff, at the end of a day in the prison scene, the women who would have been through a terrible time, and I would actually encourage them to pause for a moment, look back through your day and find something that gave you joy, something that lifted your spirit. It may be that you passed a flower in the garden. It may be that you heard a bird. It may be that someone smiled at you. So when it's really the negative times, it is very hard to be in such a space. And how do we be?
I think for all of us, probably, every time we turn on the news each morning, we feel that same feeling of oppression, negativity, desperation, almost. So perhaps the question is, does our progressive Christian outlook enable us to hold on to hope? Not only to let go of the bad things, but to hold on to hope. So at that point, we've heard... Yep, Michael.
Can I just make one comment on something you said a moment ago, Maureen, and that was about our uncertainty, about not being absolutely sure that we've got it. I think for me that's a fundamental distinction that progressive Christianity carries compared to traditional Christianity, aka conservative Christianity. There is a very strong thread in traditional conservative Christianity that they are absolutely certain that they've got it.
Yep.
One thing about progressive Christianity, we're certain that we haven't got it. Honestly, what a great attitude. It's like science. This is a model. It's wrong. We need a better one.
Think. God has given us brains, we should use them, and ears to listen, and hearts to care. So I'd like now, you've heard from, as I said, two very different points of view, a lot of information. Are there questions that you like to ask? Is there anyone brave enough to come out here and perhaps, yes, share a little of themselves as well?
I won't bother sharing too much about myself, except Peter Cranwell from Blackwood Uniting. Thank you both. Question pointed because I'm just a grassroots person. What is the Uniting Church's role in progressive Christianity? What is left for them after a via negativa purge?
I should point out to you that both Marion and I are handing the microphone to each other. Can we respectfully say we'll pass on that question, because I'm certainly not in a place to answer on behalf of the Uniting Church about their attitude to things that should be let go of in the opinion of many on the progressive side. And I don't know if you want to comment further, Marion.
I would hope that there is leadership with a wide enough vision that sees that we can incorporate what I still call the left-wing branch of the vine. Yes, I'm in danger of dropping off it, but the sense, and I see the right wing as the more conservative dimension. That's why I use that phrase, left-wing branch. The Uniting Church incorporates a whole range, I think from literalists to progressives. So, hallelujah, let's be able to continue doing that and have that open vision going forward into the future. I'm not sure that I answered your question, but that's what I would hope for.
Yeah. I think to be generous, it's not just the Uniting Church that is struggling with this at the moment in varying degrees. It interested me last week to hear from one of the two young women that there is something of a movement within young people towards what she called bells and smells religion, the kind that has a set order of service, and the incense and the bells ringing the order. And I find myself thinking perhaps it is because the world is in such turmoil at the moment that young people are looking for, something to hold on to, something secure, something safe, something that and maybe some of them are not ready yet to ask the questions. But what we have to hope is that will give them a solid grounding, and that they will reach the stage where they start to think and to question and to say, well, look, like Michael did, growing up a Catholic, I can't do this. I went through the same thing myself. My background is mixed Catholic and Anglican, and I went to a congregational Sunday school, and then as a teenager took off, and I didn't come back until I was nearly 40. And I have continued to grow and change ever since. The importance for me is having, if not bells and smells, then a community. And if you are part of a community, as I am with my home church, where asking questions is okay, they might not agree with you, but they won't yell at you, they won't throw you out and say, never darken our door again. They will listen to you, and you listen to them. And if you have that kind of community, I think you're halfway there. Anyone else like to? Yes.
Firstly, thank you to our three speakers. I've enjoyed this. I don't see in Bible a situation where Jesus is confronted with a decision on stemming violence. Where would he stand if he were the decision maker, say in a situation like the Bondi attacker, or in a military sense? Is there a justification for violence? Is there ever justification for war? I don't see that he was ever placed in that situation of having to make a decision on that sort of scale.
I obviously, to state the bleeding obvious, I can't speak for Jesus. However, there is some commentary that can be offered about someone who for many was, if not a direct follower of Jesus, certainly a follower of the way of Jesus, and that was Mahatma Gandhi. He was an extraordinary exemplar of non-violence in the face of brutal British violence and the British Empire in India, and he and his non-violent, non-cooperation was steadfast in not applying violence, but through that non-violent approach literally brought the British Empire to its knees. And you could think that his position was absolute and categorical, that he would never use violence. Mahatma Gandhi, in his own writing, said, "I used it because, as a theory, it works. It actually works. However, if it didn't work, I would be prepared to use violence in a just cause." And I guess you could have lots of philosophical discussions about whether there is a circumstance where you're prepared to use violence. If, for example, your wife and your children were going to be murdered in front of you by some lunatic, but the only way of stopping them was to kill the person. I know what I'd do, but you could have an interesting philosophical discussion involving Jesus as well.
I was a pacifist. I was part of the CND movement right up until I was in a group at one point and somebody was raising this question of violence, and they gave the scenario: you're a mother with a daughter and an SS officer comes into your house with the intention of raping your daughter. What will you be doing? And at that point I knew if I had a gun, I would be shooting him. If I had a cudgel, I would be hitting him hard on the head. At that point, at that day, I was no longer a pacifist. So I think it's the circumstances of our life and how we're seeing inhuman stuff happening, and what is it that we judge that we need to do about it. And we, on the whole, live in a very lucky, privileged society here in Australia. I mean, not everybody, I'm generalising. But it is very much an individual response at that point, yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Yes?
My name's Judy. A few of us have also wondered about this word progressive, and a couple of us have suggested regressive Christianity, where we actually strip away the rubbish that has been built up over thousands of years and actually get back to the way, the people of the way. And the churches have been fabulous at doing this, at laying on layer on layer on layer on layer, and the theologians thus understanding. But regressive Christianity sounds dreadful, but I think it's actually quite positive. If you stop and think about it, it's actually could be positive. I don't know, it's like peeling a banana.
Thank you, Judy. I love the idea of regressive Christianity.
I do too. And we would be regressing to what is it, the actual philosophy and the way of living that Jesus was actually highlighting, that sense of shalom,
Yes.
peace which means the harmony and well-being of all in society, which links into his sense of the God domain that we call the kingdom of God. I now call it the kingdom, Kindom, of God.
I have a working title for something in place of progressive Christianity, which I'll guarantee you will never, ever catch on. It's evidence-based Christianity, because I think there's this term, evidence-based decision-making, where you actually make decisions based on evidence. And I think much of traditional Christianity has been the opposite. It's been decision-based evidence-making. You decide what you are going to believe, and then you look for evidence, however flimsy,
Yes.
even if non-existent, and do that. I've never been a fan of decision-based evidence-making. I much prefer the other way around.
I can't honestly say that I'm more attracted by evidence-based Christianity than I am by regressive Christianity. We can probably take one more question if there is one. No? Yes?
Grant Jackware. I'm defending Marianne saying that she's not a Christian, and you looked at me and I thought, well, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I just wonder if I'm quite a strong Calvinist, so I'm going to say perhaps Calvin has wrecked progressive Christianity, because he's asked us to have a very close relationship with Christ, and perhaps because of Christ's godhood, in the broader sense of the word, it's a bit like the Ark of the Covenant. You don't want to be actually too close to it, and it then causes these burns and deaths, and that perhaps we've lost something in abandoning the saints. And if I could sort of label our two speakers tonight, I think Michael would perhaps be St. Thomas, would be his filter, and Marianne, you'd be I forget the term now, but St. Mary would surely be your filter to see Christ. Oh, you want to be Mary Magdalene, not the other Mary? All right, that's fair enough. Yes, so how would you answer that?
Just a little question.
The understanding of saints used to be much broader. We have something called All Saints' Day that came after Halloween, the shifting over from Celtic understandings into Christianity. And then there was an honouring of people that had died, All Hallows Eve and All Saints' Day. Okay, so that there was a sense that saints weren't just your holy designated ones. They actually were people who had been faithful in the Christian tradition and had passed on. I think I'm correct in saying that. There is nodding of head. So on that point, yes, and I would even be saying there are saints among us here. There are people here that have worked hard for justice. They have worked hard for young people. They have worked hard to get Jesus' message and modelling through to a different generation. And I'm acknowledging that, the saints that are here. Thank you.
No comment?
Was directed at Marianne, so I'll...
No comment, Your Honour.
So Tom, yeah, I'm happy to go with Thomas. Yeah, that's good. Good for me.
Okay, that's probably a good note to end on. Will you please thank St. Thomas and St. Mary? there's now supper in the room next door and an opportunity to talk to your neighbours and also to bail up Michael or Marion and ask them further questions.
May I finish with one thing?
Yes, sure.
This is my image of God. I did this painting or this image about 2 or 3 years ago. The sense of the word God, and it wraps around the earth. Thank you.
That's the big
Can you see G O
Yeah.
D? Okay.
Oh, well done. It reminds me of an image there's one out on the internet of two hands holding the earth like this. I'll leave you with an exhortation to come back again next month on I think it's the 2nd of April. Yeah, it's up here as well. On the 2nd of April, we've got Bart Ruler from the ACD. And the topic is Jesus didn't conquer death, reassessing the agency of the resurrection. So that's another challenging question. It takes us out from where we've been here, back, and you will see if you look at the list of what's available for the rest of the year from PC Forum. It's an interesting mixture, and the many voices, many pathways says we're not stuck here. We can go out, we can listen. Another example is we will have a guest speaker who is a Hindu, and we will have a guest speaker whose personal pathway is meditation and contemplation, another way of going, another way of looking. And I'd perhaps like to leave you with a thought from that contemplative person. When I said to him, yes, my take on things when I talk to my Muslim and Hindu and Baha'i friends is that there are many pathways up the mountain. And he said, no, there's only one path. But when you're on that path, you meet an awful lot of interesting people to talk to and engage with, people from different beliefs and different ideas. So good luck on the one pathway up the mountain. Thank you.